Good morning, church. So good to see you all, the bright, shiny, happy faces. All right, this morning we are continuing with the Sermon on the Mount, and Jesus begins to target what true righteousness means. So we're continuing with this. Most of us are concerned with kind of this outward appearance of what's keeping the law, and Jesus starts to point us inward, and this is where we're picking it up. He's not only concerned about murder, but about anger. Not just about adultery, but lust. Not just about keeping oaths, but about integrity. And so today, we're going to zero in specifically on bitterness and anger. And one of the quotes I've heard before was that bitterness is a poison that we drink hoping that the other person will die, right? And I think that's a very accurate picture of it. We drink this poison, and we're thinking, this person, I hope they die. But most of the time, when we walk around, others experience us, and they're like, man, I wish you were dead, right? And so this continues on, this poison, and it just continues to poison everything in our life. And before we jump into it, as we look at this idea of reaching for reconciliation, I want us to think about what is the alternative to bitterness. What's the alternative to saying, I hope someone dies? The alternative is reconciliation. I want to share a story here. In 1947, there was a Dutch Christian woman. Her name was Corrie ten Boom. She was speaking at a church in Munich in Germany about forgiveness after World War II. During the war, she and her family had hidden Jewish people from the Nazis. And for that, they were arrested and they were sent to a concentration camp. Her sister Betsy died there. After her testimony in Munich, a man approaches her in this church, and Corrie immediately recognizes him. He had been one of the guards at that concentration camp. He tells her that he had become a Christian after the war, and then he extends his hand and he says, Fraulein, would you forgive me? Corrie later writes that in that moment she felt frozen, completely frozen. She remembered the suffering, the humiliation, the death of her sister. She knew that if forgiveness was going to happen, it had to happen right there. So she prayed silently. She reached out her hand. And when she did, she said that she experienced what she described as the love of God, enabling her to forgive someone she could never forgive on her own. Now, reconciliation did not erase the past, but it did end the power that hatred had over her heart at that moment. Corrie's actions and wrestling of her heart is a real illustration of what it means to reconcile with a brother when the wounding is so deep. And reconciliation is not easy. And the more we recognize it, the more we practice it, the more we ourselves start to understand the depth of God's love for us. And so this morning, as we look at Jesus' sermon, we're going to see him raising the bar from just external behaviors to the state of our hearts that results ultimately in those external behaviors and the words. So, as we look at it today, we're going to just give a basic definition of reconciliation. What is it? Essentially, it's the restoration of a broken relationship through which estrangement is healed and friendship is renewed in Christ. So there's a broken relationship, estrangement. We feel this gap between us. And reconciliation means a healing, and this happens through Christ. It's used in the idea of two friends who are just walking along, and then they have that brokenness in this relationship, and there's an offense that someone does, and finally someone, out of all this awkwardness, starts to reach out and starts to look across the chasm and says, hey, something is off here. We need to talk. It's that text message, it's that phone call, it's that reaching across the aisle, if you will, that great gap. I can recall back in the days when I was younger, I would I would joke around a lot, and some of you know me if you hang out enough. I poke some jokes at you, and I might say some things. And I remembered at one point, one of my friends came up to me afterwards, and he said, "Hey, Nate, love you, man, but you know what? Some of these jokes kind of landed kind of hard on that person you were saying this thing about." And I didn't recognize it. I was like, "Hey, I was just having fun. I was just joking around." And others were laughing. You were laughing too. What happened, right? And then what I realized was I had to confront my heart when he confronted me. And that's the thing about reconciliation. It brings up all these natural defenses that come up in us, right? But afterwards, I recall walking with this friend, and our friendship grew stronger because of that. I could feel like I could lean on him more. I felt like I could trust him more because he saw things that I didn't see and things that I needed to correct in my own heart. So that leads us to this point, this idea that we have to look at our hearts specifically. So here it is in Matthew 21:5, chapter 5, verse 21 and 22. This is what Jesus says. You can imagine the crowd is here. They're kind of pressing in. The Pharisees and scribes are there, and here he starts quoting some things. He says, "You have heard that it was said to those of old, 'You shall not murder, and whoever murders will be liable to judgment.'" Jesus goes on, "But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council, and whoever says, 'You fool,' will be liable to the hell of fire." Now here the Jewish teachers are gathering around. They're pressing in. And they know this very, very well. The sixth commandment, thou shalt not murder. They explain away the spirit of the law, and Jesus shows the true meaning of this commandment. At the root of it, there is this anger that bursts out, that grows into murder. And even in our law today, there's differences, right, with death. There's differences in murder, and there's differences with manslaughter. Murder is defined in the Penal Code as the unlawful killing of a human being with malice aforethought. Malice aforethought. That means an intent to kill. An act with extreme disregard for the human life, knowing that death is likely. That's what murder is. It's this malice behind it. Whereas manslaughter is an unlawful killing of a human being without malice. This is like maybe killing someone by driving recklessly. Right? You did not mean it. You did not intend it. An intent is at the heart of these nuances. What's in our heart? What's our intent? And Jesus looks back to this, and he traces the roots of hatred and anger, and he traces it back to the heart. Only Jesus does this, right? He's able to get this behavior, and he goes back to saying, this is what it is. Now, to unpack this passage a little bit, this word for insult is actually raka. Right? It's a term of abuse. It's a term of contempt in Aramaic. It literally means empty-headed one. So you're calling someone, you empty-headed person. So our version of that is, you're an idiot. You're a moron, right? We've heard these. I know these are dated, right? But I remember receiving some of these words, and I remember sometimes even casting some of these words, or at the very least thinking these words of someone else. And these words mean the exact same thing. Extremely foolish, stupid, you're a senseless person. You're calling someone this. It's a derogatory term, right? For a person who lacks judgment, who's slow-witted. Calling someone you fool is spiteful, and it comes from a place of hatred, and you're condemning that person to what they are. We are condemning someone who is made in the image of God when we say such things. When we say, you empty-headed fool. So reality-wise, this is where Jesus is turning it, and he's pointing it inward, and he's saying it's really not just the tree, not just what we see as the fruits, but he's saying to us this morning, the issue is not just external behavior. It's the state of our hearts. It's the state of our heart. So first wave here is we see that Jesus is addressing the state of our heart. The next couple of verses, what we'll find is he's going to talk about the priority of reconciliation and the urgency of it, the importance of it and the urgency of it. But before we get to that, a couple of passages on this. Proverbs 4:23 says, "Guard your heart, for everything flows from it." 1 Samuel 16:7, when Samuel was supposed to choose a king for Israel, right? He makes this statement about how God sees and how we judge. 1 Samuel 16:7 says, "Man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart." The Lord looks at the heart, and He's able to convict in those spaces. Men see only what they see in front of them. This guy's tall, handsome, and strong. He must be the king. God says, no, I see the heart of this person. And that is what's important. Even now, as you hear this, and even now as you consider it, it's not just my external behavior. Sometimes I can even stand in front of someone and shake their hand, but right inside you know something is off. How many of us have felt that? I've talked to people, and I myself have held that, right? And I've been in that place of feeling like externally I'm a friend to this person, but internally I feel so far. So even now, as you're sitting in that space, is there a splinter in your heart as you think through the contact list of your friends and family and people that you are, I'm going to get in front of that person. I'll say hi to them, but I'm going to just kind of try to avoid them a little bit because something is off. That's what we're talking about. And this is what God is saying. Are you able to deal with this? Are you able to come to terms? Because after all, we serve and we worship the God who reconciles, the God who brings relationships together. And if we continue in this, there's something that is not congruent here, something that's not aligning when our hearts are against someone, but externally we're trying to cover it up. We're going to move on here to the priority of reconciliation. In verses 23 to 24, it's really interesting if you all can turn there in your passages. If you're offering your gift at the altar and you remember that your brother has something against you, you leave that gift there and you before the altar and you go. First, be reconciled to your brother, and then you come and offer your gift. Now, this teaching would have been shocking to the original listeners because they worshiped at the temple, and it was central to Jewish life. And the temple reference here would have been in Jerusalem. And Jesus is not minimizing worship. He's not saying that worship is less. Right? He's emphasizing that true worship requires that reconciled hearts. And I just find it fascinating, even in this passage as we look at it. If we have something against someone, we go to church and leave your offering, and you go. Make sure you leave that offering, and you go and take care of this, right? It's important. What he's saying here is it's an important thing, and it's an urgent thing to be reconciled. It's important to pay my bills at the end of the month, but is it urgent? What's important and urgent is, did I turn off the gas completely when I left the house? Is the stove still on? Because there may not be a house when I come back if I did leave it on. This passage addresses something very powerful. I mean, if you really think about it, imagine coming into this church, right? You're driving in to that corner right there. You make that corner, you turn in, you park your car, you get out of the car, and you're walking towards this church. And here you are. And it's funny that we have our offering box right at that door, right? So you're walking in through that door, and then all of a sudden what Jesus is saying is, as you're walking through these doors, you know that you have something against someone, a brother or a sister. And you know that you're harboring this sort of bitterness. How many of us have actually done what this passage says? How many of us have walked through those doors, put our offering in the envelope, slid it in there, and stepped back out and texted our friend or brother or family member and actually said, hey, I feel convicted that I've been carrying this thing that we both know but both won't say? How many of us have actually done that? That's wild, right? I mean, this is what the passage is calling for us to say, this is a priority for me. it is important for me to mend these relationships. And right relationships are so important. These are the things that God is about. Right relationship with him also means right relationship with others. It's kind of like this, just to give you an illustration. Some of you may say, you know what, Nate, I really love you. I think you're a great guy. You're an all right preacher, but you're a good guy, right? But I love you. But you know what? Kairos, he's kind of annoying. I really don't like that guy. Kind of runs around, punches me in places I don't want to be punched. It's no fun. I really don't like him at all, right? He has this voice that annoys me, right? And everything about him I just don't like. Now, me as being his father, what do you think, right? Like, I would probably have a problem with you, right? Let's just put it that way. Now, let's be honest, like, reality-wise, that's usually not the case. Most of the time, it's, Nate, I really love Kairos. It's you that I have a problem with. I mean, if I'm honest, that's usually the case, right? I think Pastor Andy has said this many times, right? He said, I don't know about you, Nate, but I love Kairos. Just leave Kairos here. But let's be honest, right? Any version of that kind of a relationship, it just doesn't sit right. Like, if you are my friend and you tell me that you don't like my son, first of all, I'm like, dude, he's 5 years old, right? Second of all, I mean, he's an imprint of me, so we're kind of the same. And that's what we're saying when we say this to God. God, I love you, but your kids, they're annoying. Something about them I just can't handle. But Lord, I love you. I like singing worship songs. They're fantastic. But man, that person sitting behind me, that person in front of me, that family member you gave me, I could do without, right? This is what we're talking about. And God says, I've crafted this person in my image. So when you speak to him about these people, or you say to others those kind of things, it's like we're talking to God in this way. Where do we see this in Scripture? In 1 John 4:20 says simply this. If anyone says, I love God, I love you, Lord, but hates his brother, he is a liar. That's crazy, right? Wait, how did I lie? I just said I love you, God, but I hate my brother. Well, he does not love his brother whom he has seen, cannot love God whom he has not seen. Fascinating, right? If you can't love someone here, how can you love in this way? In other words, God says there's a relationship here, a very clear relationship. If we cannot love one another, which is literally what Jesus said is the marker of a Christian, not theological thought, not knowledge, it's the love for one another that marks the Christian. And if we do not have that, we do not know the love of God. And this is what Jesus is aiming at. He goes after the heart. And I love that Jesus does this. So, in summary, is getting in right relationships with other, that really important to you? Or do you put that under a bunch of other things, like my stocks or other things that I'm checking all the time? Is it that important? Is it as important as maintaining that church attendance streak that you have, right? What is it? Where does it fall on that list of importance, that priority? And here, lastly, we're going to look this morning together at this idea of urgency for reconciliation, right? And this passage is verses 25. We see here, Jesus shifts a bit. He goes on to say, come to terms quickly with your accuser while you're going with him to court, lest your accuser hands you over to the judge, and the judge hands you over to the guard, and you be put in prison. For truly, I say to you, you will never get out until you have paid the last penny. So, reconciliation is important. It's about the heart, and it is urgent. It is important and urgent. Jesus describes settling matters with an adversary, kind of something that has to be done quickly. And he illustrates kind of a graduation of consequences, right? If you read this passage, just looking at it quickly and cursory, come to terms with your accuser quickly while you're going with him. So you're walking with this person, right? Lest your accuser hands you over to the judge, and then they hand you to the guard, and then you be put in prison. You can kind of see the graduation of consequences in this. if you don't take care of it, right? Essentially, this is the idea that we can kind of see when we get into a little bit of a fender bender, for example, right? And this recently happened to me where I was driving along and it was raining back in that time, and you're stopping and someone else behind you just slides right in and boom, hits you from the back, and we have to get out and talk. So you do the roll down the window and the hand wave, and we all know the hand wave and what that means, right? Please pull over, right? If you don't, then you might get in trouble later. But the hand wave means let's pull over, let's look at and see what happens. Now the person comes out, and you can have that friendly conversation. What are you gonna do? You're gonna talk it out. You're gonna call up the CHP. You're gonna get a report done. Or you're gonna get their license plate. What is it? If it's not that big of a deal, hey, don't worry about it. I don't see a dent. You don't have any problems. Let's move on with life. Let's reconcile this, right? It's kind of this idea that if you could take care of it outside of the courts, it's going to be less consequences, yes? I've exchanged numbers with people, and, it's happened. And you're just kind of like, okay, I'm just going to let this go. But if you need to get others involved, as you know, it can become more costly and it becomes more involved. What Jesus is saying is it's urgent. Deal with it. Deal with your anger, deal with your resentment soon. Because unresolved conflict, it tends to escalate. It gets worse. It starts to grow, and you know this, right? Like you can hold an anger where a bitterness starts to grow deep inside, where someone asks you, what did that person even do to you? Why do you hate them so much? And you're like, I don't even know anymore. Something happened. But it was so long ago that it didn't even register for my heart. All I know is these feelings of resentment, and my body reacts to this person now. It's kind of like a wound that turns into an infection. I can remember at one point when I was working on the roof of my house, I got bit by a spider, and I didn't even know it. I thought it was a mosquito bite, so I started scratching it, and the next thing I knew, it started looking weird, and I'm like, this is not a mosquito bite. And I go to my wonderful, brilliant wife, and I said, honey, what is going on with my leg, right? And she says, you sissy, what's wrong with you? Just slap some Neosporin on it and get on with life. And a week later, I'm like, honey, Neosporin isn't working. And she's like, right? You're such a baby. And so finally, I go to the doctor, and then the doctor is like, oh man, whoa, this is not good. Like there's a ring around this dot, right? And that's not a good sign. It's an infection. So they give me some medication, they debride it. And then the doctor had this fascinating conversation with me. He said, hey, so why didn't you come in sooner with this? And I said, well, my wife works in the medical field. And he's like, oh. Yeah, he kind of did, of course. Of course. Yep. He says, we are the worst offenders. Literally, he said, we're the worst offenders, right? And this idea that what ends up happening is if you don't take care of these things, it gets worse. I have an ER nurse friend of mine who says the same thing. He's so used to seeing the worst of the worst that he's kind of numb to the smaller wounds that could lead to bad things. And that's kind of us. That's kind of us as Christians, right? We're the worst of the offenders. We have kind of become desensitized. We're like, you know what? It's not murder, right? I'm not killing anyone. I'm just angry. I just don't like this person. It's just they're not my cup of tea. That's all. That's what we'd call it. I'm not doing anything to harm them, but I'm holding something in here. There's an infection in here. And what Jesus is saying is we got to take care of these things. It's urgent. You can't just ignore it. Unresolved conflict tends to escalate. It doesn't just go away by itself. In the same way my bite didn't go away by itself. So, if we are called to be reconcilers, just as Jesus was, just as God is, he saw that our relationship with him, being apart, pushing against him, was important and it was urgent. And he sent his son to save us from ourselves. This is who we worship. This is who we are made in the image of. And so as we think about that, what is it that we do to reflect that image of a reconciler? One who does not allow anger to take root in our heart. One who sees that reconnecting with others is a priority and it is urgent. I have made, at least for myself, a simple vow. As a Christian, two things. One, I will not keep secrets. I know that I need my brothers and my sisters to know about who I am, and I lean on some key brothers of mine that I know that when I struggle with things, I go to them. And I pray together, and we go through the Word together. Number two, reconcile as much as I can with as many as I can in this world. Those two things go a long way as a follower of Christ. Keep no secrets. Live in a way that your heart is open, and connect with those that you know you need to reconcile with. So important for us. And this is what Jesus is essentially saying. Reconciliation is urgent. Why? Because time is limited. Who is to say that we won't be called home at some point? And when we look back on the film of our life, we see just trails of proverbial bodies, if you will, of friendships that were broken, that we never mended. And not that we lose our salvation, but just to stand before Christ, who reconciled all of his enemies to himself, the one who prays for the one who is slamming the nails into his hands on the cross. That's the one that we serve, the ultimate reconciler. That to me says something. How do I reflect the image of my Father, of Jesus himself? So, where does this leave us? What next? Well, here it is. Concerning relationships, do you have a splinter in your heart? Do you have something that you are holding as you are going through, again, just kind of a assessment, if you will, sitting in your space? Is there some face that comes to your mind? Some relationship that you know that, hey, I need to reach out to this person. Right after this, even, as I'm praying, I need to text this person maybe, because this is what the Lord is calling me to. Is there a splinter in your heart concerning relationships? Secondly, pray for softened hearts and forgiveness in the relationship. I know it's hard to reach out to another person. It's hard to put yourself out there and to even say these things. But it is what we are called to as Christians, to put ourselves out there. And even if you can't yet reach out to them, even if you can't text them, start with the number 2. Pray for softened hearts, your own heart to be softened. Pray for that person. Even if you can't pray for them all the way through, at least start with their name. I find that helps. Just start with the name. Just Alex. Just pray their name, right? Whatever it might be. And then eventually pray for blessing on that person. Pray for the people around that person, right? Pray, and you will find that while that person may not change, your heart does. And this is what God is after, that we begin to shift and mold and shape more like him. Pray for that person. And then, if you can, the third point is really important. Reach out to them. Reach out to them. Do your best to reach out. If the person doesn't respond, it's fine. Continue to step 2, right? Go back to step 2. This could be a long-term deal, which is what I want to leave us with as I close. I want to give us an illustration to just pull this a bit together. I want to remind you of a story of reconciliation between 2 people. And again, this is a story I've shared before, but I think this illustrates it so well. This is my father, the younger one, and my grandfather, the older one. And my grandfather had kicked my father out as a teenager because he came to know Christ. My grandfather, the Buddha idol maker, was saying, this is not of us, this is not our family, get out, you are no longer my son. And my father was a teenager. And as my father grew, and as my father walked with the Lord, he was continuously pricked in the heart and convicted to continue to reach out to his father. Even though his father said, I want nothing to do with you, my father would continuously kind of give love in any way he could. He'd go whenever he could go to Cambodia and share the word, the gospel. He would still give money, even if it meant just dropping it off at my grandfather's house, even if it meant handing it to someone to give it to my grandfather. He was always trying to reconcile. He was like the water that seems weak, but if you drop it over and over on a rock that keeps dropping, right? What ends up happening? There's dents that happen in that rock. If you go to any mountain, you'll see it. And that was what my father did. He just continued to drop droplets of water of love and reaching and reconciliation and concern for my father, my grandfather. And it wasn't until the end of my grandfather's life, and the reason why I say this is because my grandfather wrote a letter to my father, and he said, this is the reason why I am giving my life to your God, to Christ. And it wasn't because my dad theologically argued to him or presented it in a way that was super powerful. It was because of his continuous love for him, even though he hated my father. Literally, I mean, he's the Buddha idol maker. That's like Kairos becoming a Satanist, right? Like, that's the opposite. And yet, my grandfather said, it's because of your love to me. And I can't understand that, is what my grandfather said. And he said, if that's the God you serve, I want to know him. To me, that is a powerful message. And one of the only times I've seen my father cry was when he got that letter. One of the only times. He was a strong man. He went through war. He went through prison, my father did, for his faith. And I dare say, my father was a clear example of what it means to say reconciliation is a priority and it's urgent. And he never stopped. It may have never changed, but it didn't prevent my father from continuing on this way. And I urge us this morning as we sit with this, don't leave your life unreconciled. I encourage you, I implore to you, as the scriptures has, Jesus is reminding us this morning, reconcile, reconcile, reconcile. Any way you can. If you can drop those droplets of love, do it. What might that look like this morning? Let's pray.